Hi, my name is Praneeth. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the interesting topic, the moon. Many of us have seen the moon for all of our lives, but not many of us have actually thought about the history and how it was created and what were some of the spacecraft that we even sent there. So that is what we're going to be covering in this video. So be sure to watch till the end. So for the brief history of the moon. The moon was formed around 4.5 billion years ago, and scientists believe that it was created by a collision, basically, between Earth and another Mars-sized object called Theia. These two collided, and because of the collision, this resulted in a ton of rocks and debris going into Earth's orbit, which eventually collected together and formed to become what we know now as the moon. Because the moon has almost no atmosphere, this led to all the craters actually hitting the surface instead of burning up in the atmosphere like it does here on Earth. This is why the moon that we know today is filled with craters. So for a few facts about the moon is approximately 2,200 miles across, which is approximately the diameter of Australia. It is 220,000 miles away from Earth, and evidence has actually shown that it's actually moving further away. So when the collision actually happened, the moon was actually probably much closer to the Earth than it is now. It is 220,000 miles away, and it has approximately 1/6 of the gravity of the Earth because of its lower mass. For many generations, we have actually thought of going to the moon because it has fascinated us so much in our astrology and astronomical studies. But really, we've actually started trying in the late 40s and the 50s, mainly by the Russians and NASA, or the US. They both were in the Cold War, racing to get to the space and the moon first. So the Russians actually beat the US and tried attempting to send the first satellite or spacecraft, the Luna 1, to actually get to the moon. But unfortunately, it did not work, and a year later, they tried with the Luna 2, and on September 13th, 1959, it was the first spacecraft or human-made object to actually touch the moon. This was not like one of the landings that you think today, though. It had no rockets to slow down its descent, and it basically just crashed into the surface of the moon. But it was proved that it is possible to actually get to the moon. Soft landings would only first be attempted by the Luna 9. And the first US spacecraft to actually reach the moon was 3 years later in the Ranger 4 in 1962. So we've sent all these spacecraft there exploring and satellites mapping out the surface of the moon. But next, it was really time to think how we could actually send people to the moon. Both the Russians and the US started to try and do this. But there were a few major challenges. Because space travel was relatively new, we did not know much about the long-term effects of space on the human body, and it was still being tested and experimented on by other satellites and astronauts in orbit. Another problem was food, oxygen, and water. These astronauts are going to be journeying to the moon, staying at the moon, and coming back, which could take about a week, as they predicted. This led to solutions trying to find out how we can reduce the weight of these, because every single pound was going to cost thousands upon thousands of more money because of the extreme cost to actually put a rocket on the moon. The journey there would take approximately 3 days, and 3 days to come back, and the time that they decide to actually stay there. So this was going to be a very expensive project, which a nation had to fully commit itself into doing so. These were some of the challenges that they were both faced with, but eventually the Apollo 11 landed at June 20th, 1969 on the moon for the first time that humans have ever stepped on the moon. Before this, the 10 have previously been just experimenting with the Saturn V rocket that actually took the humans to the moon with other crewed missions, but none have actually attempted to make a landing, and Apollo 1 was the first to do a landing, and it did so successfully. So that is a history of the spacecraft that actually landed. So we are again aiming to get to the moon in the future again. But what are some of the benefits that are actually going to make us want to go to the moon in the first place? So first of all, and most importantly, it can be a hub for future exploration. Like I mentioned before, the moon only has 1/6 of the gravity of Earth, which means that it will actually require less rocket fuel to get off the moon's surface, because the rocket would not have to go through that much amount of gravity, which means that it will be more efficient to launch off the moon's surface instead of the Earth's. Also, another huge benefit is there's a large abundance of hydrogen and oxygen in the lunar surface, which means that we can actually create a rocket fuel on the moon as well, without having the need to actually carrying it from Earth to the moon. So we can actually just mine the surface to create a rocket fuel, which is great for future exploration. Also, instead of just mining, as a byproduct of just mining oxygen and hydrogen, we will also get many rare earth metals that are not found much on Earth, especially like aluminum and other rare earth metals. These mainly came from asteroids that crash into the moon. As you might know, asteroids are mainly made of metals, and because the moon is filled with craters, the remnants of the asteroids will actually be in the soil, which we can then harness and bring back to Earth, or even stay there to make anything. But another thing is, there is a ton of water there for our future colonists, which means that we might actually be able to make a self-sustaining colony there without the need of constantly resupplying it. Also, there's also a thing that if something was gonna happen to Earth, then we will always have a backup colony to go to. In this case, it would be the moon, or in the future, it might even be Mars. But the more we have, the better. So those are some of the benefits that might actually make us want to go to the moon. But with all benefits comes some challenges as well. One, the atmosphere, like I mentioned before, is almost nothing, so there's obviously no air to breathe. But like I said before, there is oxygen in the water and in the soil. But to actually extract it from the water and the soil, we are going to have a ton of energy. At the start, this can be provided by solar panels or nuclear power from Earth. But in the long term, it's probably best to rely on those two as well. But with solar panels, we can effectively make them on the moon, because there's a huge amount of silica materials on the moon's regolith, which means that we can actually just mine the silica and turn it into solar panels. So if we have the energy problem, we can then use the energy to actually heat up the water. But the moon does get extremely cold, especially on the dark side, so we're going to have to find some way to actually keep the water warm enough so it doesn't just go into ice again. And we're going to need shelter, because again, there's no atmosphere, no air. We're going to need a place to put our oxygen somewhere. And that most likely could be in above ground shelters made of Martian soil, or even underground shelters that that scientists are exploring to create. These will protect us from radiation as well, because moon does not have a magnetic sphere like Earth does, and it won't be protected from the radiation by the sun or other gamma rays from the universe. And these are some of the main challenges. And food. We're gonna have to import most of our food from Earth at the very start until we can get liquid water easily on the moon's surface. And even then, we can't really rely on all of our food from the moon, and we're always probably gonna have to ship some from Earth, especially in the starting days when there's just not that many. And all of this, again, like I mentioned before, is expensive. Shipping the water there, shipping the food there is going to be extremely expensive. And though there are being many ways to actually reduce the cost of actually going there, it is still going to be extremely expensive for all these new technologies to actually research and develop. This will be extremely expensive, but it can be extremely beneficial if we actually commit to building a colony on the moon. So these are some of the challenges that we might explore. So thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.